You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's episode, which actually features the brother of a previous guest on the show. Pretty cool, right? A couple of reminders here. Please hit the Apple Podcast ratings and reviews. We want to get to at least 1,000 reviews and crack the Apple Podcast top 100. And because it's the holidays and you want to do a gift for us, well, this is the easiest gift you can give us. If everyone who listened to this podcast went to Apple Podcasts and left a rating and or a review, it doesn't have to be a long one, could just be a couple of sentences. You don't even have to write anything. You could even just leave a star rating and we'd be well on our way to like 1 million reviews. That's how many people have listened to this show in total, and on a weekly basis. We have thousands of listeners, so you can help us out just by leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. That will grow this show immensely. By the way, keep the YouTube subscriptions coming. We've surpassed 2,000. On our way to 3,000. Keep it up. Don't forget to follow us as well on all the other social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast. Speaking of gifts, if you're looking for gifts for the holidays, check out our book and film list on our website. Go to hazardground.com, click on the list tab at the top of the homepage. There you'll find all the books written by past Hazard Ground guests, as well as movies, some of them written, directed, or produced, as well as the movies that have inspired us throughout our military careers, gotten us through lengthy deployments, or even inspired us to join the military. So again, our website, hazardground.com. Also, our Amazon promotion there. If you're going to do your holiday shopping on Amazon, go to hazardground.com first, click on the Amazon button, and you can help veterans all throughout the country just by going to hazardground.com first, then going to Amazon to do your shopping, because we get a percentage of what you spend, and then we donate a portion of that percentage back to the great charities you've heard featured here on the Hazard Ground. So again, Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review, and our website, hazardground.com. Hope everybody is well, hope everybody is safe, and having a great holiday season. Now on to this week's episode. Joining us this week is a retired U.S. Army Master Sergeant who had 21 years in the Army, including 15 in the Special Operations Community and Delta Force. He has 12 total deployments, only 1 to Afghanistan and 11 to Iraq over the course of his career. He has co-founded 3 different organizations that he is a part of, including companies called Elder Heart, Mission 22, and Warrior's Heart. He is a big advocate of helping PTSD, TBI, and suicide awareness. And coincidentally, his brother was also on the podcast last year. He is Tom Spooner, joining us on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Tom, welcome, man, and thank you for being here.
Man, Mark, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to it also.
This is the first set of brothers we've had on the podcast. So your brother Scott was an earlier guest, and he's a good storyteller, man. So you got a high bar to clear, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to clear that one. He's a good speaker. He's really good storyteller.
And it is kind of weird. I mean, you know, usually guys who are in the special ops community and who have as many deployments as you do, it's sort of spread out, but you're really lopsided with 11 in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. Like, do you look back and go, I kind of wish I had more time in Afghanistan?
I don't know, man. I think the answer is yeah. Just if it would have been a little bit more leveled out. But it was just a task organization thing, you know, where they carved us over to Iraq. So I just did my 1 deployment in 2002 in Afghanistan, and then the rest were in Iraq. So yeah, I mean, I really liked all the work that we did in Iraq, though. It was super cool to be able to, you know, take it from 2003, you know, all the way to my last one, you know, in 2009. So it was super cool to see the whole process, you know, from the invasion. I wasn't in the initial invasion, but, you know, a couple months after. But from invasion all the way to an election, you know, was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It was, so to that piece, I'm grateful about it, but I would have liked to have had a little bit more time in Afghanistan.
Well, you and I may have crossed paths in Iraq in 05 and 06, whether we knew it or not.
I bet we did.
I was part of Siege of SOF at the time as well, so we probably have some names and people that we may know of that are the same. But before we get to that, let's go back to the very beginning about how and why you got in the Army.
Yeah, man. So how and why I got in the Army. So my grandfather was a World War II vet, and my uncle, who was an idol of mine, he was a 3-tour Vietnam vet. And so, you know, I was one of those kids running around 10 years old with, my uncle's T-shirt, U.S. paratrooper, death from above, running, so, and I've always wanted to just join the military. Always had the Soldier of Fortune magazines. I mean, the guns, just military. That's all I've ever wanted to do, was join the military.
Now, you went straight out of high school and enlisted?
I did not. So my uncle and my grandfather were both enlisted guys. So they told me that, hey, they knew I was going to join the military, but they're like, hey, if you're going to join the Army, you need to be an officer. And I did what they told me to do. Unfortunately, I couldn't pull it off. So I went to ROTC at Florida State, did some junior college time, then ROTC at Florida State. I actually went to Airborne school as a cadet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but then I didn't do so well in school. I tended to have more of a good time than I did work time. We'll just say my work ethic wasn't in place yet. and so I kind of was tanking it there at school, and I never really wanted to do it to begin with. And so I enlisted in 1990. And so that was how I kicked it all off.
Now, did your uncle or anybody in your family tell you, hey, man, you're blowing it. Like, this is a great opportunity. Why don't you take this more seriously?
Oh, yeah. Of course they did, and but I was a bit hard to handle in my youth. I was a little bit of a hellraiser, one might say, but or a lot of a hellraiser. And I just knew I couldn't pull it off, man. I mean, I knew I was disappointing them and let them down, and that kind of hurt me a bit. But I mean, the writing was on the wall that that's not something that I was going to be able to pull off where I was at that time. Yeah.
Now, so you make this transition from ROTC, which a lot of the enlisted folks who never went through it will chuckle at, right? Because it's ROTC. Like, basic training is harder than ROTC. And I am a product of ROTC, so I can say that out loud. Nobody should be able to be offended about it. That said, when you make that transition, you get to basic, are you starting to think, maybe I should have stayed in school and did a little bit better with my grades?
Not for a second.
Really?
Man.
Okay.
Yeah. It was just as soon as I hit basic training, man, I knew I was home. I mean, I knew for the first time in my life, like, I fit in. You know what I mean? I was exactly where I wanted to do. I was already, and again, a lot of that had to do with I was 20 years old when I came in. So I had a little bit of life experience, under my belt versus the guy just coming out of high school. So I had that little bit of we're talking basic training, right? So it was like I had a little bit of a leadership quality to me. I had a little bit of taking charge, and I was super, super motivated. So, and I wanted to get promoted to E2 before I got out of basic. So the only way to do that was to do well,
So you already had your airborne wings, right? And
right.
Did you know you wanted to be an
story.
infantryman? Is that what you were trying to do as ROTC? Were you say you were going infantry the whole way?
Yeah, man. The only thing that I've ever wanted to do, and this is funny because it was the one thing that I never did, was all I ever wanted to do was be in Ranger Battalion. That was it. That was my whole mission in life, was to be a Ranger. So the recruiter got me really good. So whenever I joined the first time, it was joined a 2-year contract, 11 X-ray, unassigned. So went to basic training, crushed basic training, did really good. Then it came time for AIT, and they said, hey, you're going to be an 11 hotel. Like, what the hell is that?
It was an 11 hotel, yeah.
I got it, and I was like, no, I'm going to be 11 Bravo, and I'm going to go. I've already been to airborne school, so I'm going to go right to RIP, what they call RASP now.
Yep.
And I'm going to a range regiment. And they're like, no, you're 11 hotel, and it's like, okay, that's anti-tank guy. And I'm like, well, do they have those in Ranger Battalion? And they're like, nope. And so there ended my first chance, of going there. So I went basic AIT, and a funny story is that I didn't put my airborne wings on my uniform until graduation day of basic training, and because I didn't want to get all that heat, you know what I mean, and all those questions. So I actually pulled it off, which was a big win in my mind. Got totally smoked, you know, on the day of graduating, you know, basic and AIT because, you know, they didn't know I was airborne qualified. But that was their fault. They didn't. They should have looked at the records, you know, in my book.
So did you feel like your dream was getting crushed if all you wanted to do was be a Ranger and they told you that's not going to happen? Or were you at the point where you're like, okay, somewhere down the line it'll happen for me? Or did you think it was never going to happen at that point?
Well, at that point I was like the block had been checked that I was in the Army, I was in the infantry, and I was going to the 82nd. And I was super stoked about that. Because while I was in basic training is when the Gulf War kicked off. So, you know, I went in that summer, you know, and, you know, it was 1990, you know what I mean? There wasn't nothing going on, you know, as far as big stuff, not taken away from Panama or Grenada, but, you know, there hadn't been any big stuff going on. And so, you know, I was just coming in and no war's ever going to happen. Not that I wasn't thinking that, but everybody was. And, you know, and then the Gulf kicked off that summer. So all that I was excited about was that, hey, I was going to get to my unit and then immediately, you know, go to Saudi Arabia, that's what I did. I left Fort Benning. You know, like any good story, you know, before you go to war, there's one thing you have to do, you know, and that's get married. Right. I mean, right. So, because you got to get married because you go to war and you die, and then, you know, the widow is crying. You know what I mean? I was a young, naive, you know what I mean? I was like, hey, man, I'm following the textbook. And so got married when I was 20 years old before I went up to the 82nd. I got to the 82nd, and, you know, within 2 weeks, that was probably about 3 weeks of getting there. Then next thing you know, I was shipped over to Saudi Arabia to link up with my unit there, which was first of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment.
All right.
That's my alma mater.
I mean, you're living the life right now. This is all you ever wanted to do. You get there. I mean, what's it like?
Yeah, man. It was, I mean, again, back to being a naive, young, innocent, like, hey, you know, red, white, and blue, loving, living the dream guy. You know, I mean, I got to my squad. You know, a lot of the guys that I was with had jumped into Panama. So, you know, they had combat experience. My platoon sergeant, you know, was a Vietnam veteran. So, I mean, I was immediately with a group of grown-ass men, you know what I mean, who knew how to soldier. And again, I was in heaven, man. I mean, it sucked, you know, but I mean, I was right where I wanted to be.
All right. So how does Desert Storm end for you? I mean, do you actually get to see combat? Because a lot of guys didn't.
No, we didn't. I got to run into a few bad guys. We had some near misses with a couple of things, and we got to clear a bunch of bunkers that still had folks in them. So I got nothing, of course, what happened after compared to what happened, you know, after 9/11. Sure, yeah. But at that time, being a guy just off the, you know, a civilian off the streets, you know, and now in combat in Iraq, you know, it was a very big deal. And it made a huge impact on me. Like I said, we didn't get into any really big firefights or anything, but we experienced a lot of, you know, for me, like a lot of the devastation of war, and all those different aspects that I had never been exposed to. So it really set the tone for me on the importance of training, on the importance of doing the right thing, you know, and being a really a good soldier, you know.
Mm-hmm. So when do you get to Ranger School?
So I got back from, it was, I think it was April, May of 91, because, you know, once it kicked off in January, it was soon over. Yeah. We stayed a little bit later, came back. As soon as I got back, I was, of course, how do I get to Ranger School? I didn't even have a year in the Army. But I got my PFC. I got my CIB, PFC, and I was like, hey, I wanted to go to Ranger School. Well, at the time in the 82nd, you know, you had to be a Spec 4 to go to Ranger School. The only guys that could go to Ranger School as a PFC were guys from the Ranger Regiment. So I went to, they were running battalion pre-Ranger PT, and my platoon sergeant, I had told him that I wanted to go do that. I said, but I'm only a PFC. And he was like, well, I don't care. Go do it. And so I went and did it. And I ended up getting a pre-Ranger slot there in the 82nd. I go through pre-Ranger, successfully complete pre-Ranger, come back, and now it's time to cut me orders. And then the battalion finds out, like, hey, this guy's a PFC. Like, we can't send him, and so they brought my platoon sergeant and me on the carpet, and we were getting, of course, I thought they were going to kill me. You know what I mean? I thought I was just going to die as a young PFC with a year in the Army, a little bit less than a year. And then next thing you know, it was a whole setup because my Vietnam vet platoon sergeant had gamed it the whole way. They were saying the division's going to lose a slot. It's all your fault, and what are we going to do and everything. And then my platoon sergeant looks at him and says, well, why don't you just promote him and send him to Ranger School? And so next thing you know, I got promoted to Spec 4 and got sent off to Ranger School. So
that's pretty awesome.
So it was super awesome. But I mean, that has been the story of my military career, was just having these great human beings around me, great soldiers, great NCOs, great officers also. But I always had, for the most part, I had senior NCOs looking after me. And because I was doing all the right things, I was working hard, I was motivated, I was just soldiering, and so I went to Ranger School. I failed my patrols in the mountains, so I got to do the mountains twice. And then, but I graduated Ranger School, came back, and at that time, in 1992, in the 82nd, the only people with Ranger tabs were guys that had come from regiment, or officers usually,
right?
That had gone through during our ROTC. And so here I was as a Spec 4 in the 82nd with a Ranger tab. I mean, I was like the dadgum golden boy. So next thing you know, it was PLDC, then it was promotion, and then it was Jump Master, and then it was Pathfinder, and then it was Air Assault. It was, everything that I could possibly do. I absolutely loved. I was in the 82nd from 90 to 95, and I absolutely, to date, some of the best NCOs that I've ever worked with in my whole career, meaning like just leaders of men, were some of those platoon sergeants, during those times. And, and some of those guys, I mean, they were 18-year E6s,
Wow.
I mean, they were, on paper, they didn't look, they looked like, they were failures, but.
Well, that would be the standard
world,
today. Like, honestly, today you look at that kind of individual as a failure, but you and I both remember an Army where making E7 was probably the hardest thing you can do on the enlisted side. Like, that was the rank that was the biggest hurdle you needed to clear.
Yeah, man. And so I had those kind of men always. I mean, even my battalion sergeant major was Sergeant Major Hobart, which, he's in the book Charlie Rangers. And so I always had these soldiers, these NCOs that had been in combat. That's who was training me, and my platoon sergeant told me something that really shaped me, of course, as young, and it shapes me still today. As I got out of PLDC, so here I am, Spec 4, or I'm a corporal now, right? And I got out of PLDC, and I got a Ranger tab, and I'm just all that. And platoon sergeant asked me, he's like, "Hey, what's the duties of NCO?" And it's like, "Yeah, mission first and health and welfare of the troops." He's like, "Yeah, okay, that's great." He's like, "I know you got the mission down." It's like, well, what does health and welfare of the troops mean? And it's like, I just got out of PLDC. It's like, okay, I know how many kids they have. I know if they have any doctor appointments. I know, what troubles they're having going on. I know where they're at. And he's like, "No, jackass, it doesn't have anything to do with that." And I was like, oh. And so it's like, okay, well, what does it mean? What does health and welfare of the troops means? And he said, it means that you give them the ability to survive and thrive in combat. That's what that means. Well, that's a whole different ball game than beans and bullets and all that other stuff. And man, whenever he sunk that into me, you know what I mean, of that's what it meant to be a good NCO. You know what I mean, was to prepare these men that are underneath me, not only to survive combat, but to thrive in it, and to be successful. That changed my whole mindset. That changed everything, how I conducted business as an NCO from that moment forward, even till today.
It's funny when you bring that up, and I'm sorry to cut you off here real quick.
No, go ahead.
It's interesting because when you said the same thing and you started describing the same thing, I remember being a lieutenant, right? Like when I was a second lieutenant and you get your platoon, of course, I'm the same age you were at the time. I'm 21 years old, and you talk about the health and welfare and morale. And it's all those things, right? Oh, have a leader book, write down their birthdays and send cards to their family and, show them how much you really care about them. And you'll earn the respect and everything of your troops. And I was waiting with kind of bated breath to see where you were taking the whole thing. And it's 100% correct. But back then, it wasn't a mindset that we had to make sure the people we were in charge of had the skills to survive in combat. It's that way now. But, my active duty time prior to 9/11, health and welfare was what you thought it was. At least that's what I remember it being, the idea, if somebody would have said to me back then, prior to 9/11, if they said, hey, Lieutenant, health and welfare is teaching you guys to survive in combat, I'd look at them sideways and go, dude, we're not going to war anywhere. What the hell are you talking about? Like, what combat are you referring to? I just, I just, again, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just felt like, there was something there that struck a chord with me because I thought the same way you did. That's how I would have answered the same thing as a second lieutenant or a first lieutenant in charge of a platoon.
Yeah, man. And that was, again, that's why I always talk about the men that have been in my life. Without them, I don't know how I would have been. I mean, I would have been okay. You know what I mean? But I had these men that had been in combat. You know what I mean? They had lost people. You know what I mean? They had whatever mistakes they had made, they had worked through, and here they were, just passing along. They were being old warriors, I mean, they didn't die. So their job was to prepare the next generation, and there were so many guys at that time, soldiers at that time that didn't have the benefit that I did of had these combat veterans around me, even whenever I was in the 82nd in the early 90s, it was kind of unheard of. And then, I mean, if you look at the guys that were, damn it, I'm not going to remember his name now, but he was the first CENTCOM commander in Abizaid. So
General Abizaid, yeah.
So my brigade commander when I was in that 82nd was General Abizaid. One of his battalion commanders for 2nd Battalion was General McChrystal. Colonel McChrystal at the time. And so, I mean, I was just, again, some people have horror stories with coming in the military and the guys that they were with, and everybody has folks that they would rather not be around and stuff. But I mean, overall, my whole time and as we go through my timeline, you'll see that everywhere I showed up, I had combat veterans waiting there to show me the way, like to teach me what was right. Not what I thought was right, but like, this is what you need to do, boy. It was. I finished up there with the 82nd. And like I said, every unit that I left, I loved the unit that I was in. It wasn't like, this place sucks, I'm going to go to the next one. For me, it was always about, man, can I make it at the next level? Do I have what it takes? That was always the challenge. And I always was just wanting to learn more and more about the military. What can I do? There was never an opportunity that I ever missed. And so the next thing for me was and I had, of course, I was running my own little game, right? So I'd been almost 5 years there in the 82nd, and I knew my time was up. I was either going to get tagged for drill sergeant or recruiter. And so I was like, well, let me go ahead and drop my packet, go Special Forces selection. And
when did you first hear the term Special Forces? When did it was because you always had Ranger in mind? So did you know about Special Forces?
Well, I did. So I had Ranger in mind, and then my reenlistment NCO was the second guy after the recruiter that got me. whenever it came, because I only came in on a 2-year contract, but within those 2 years, I was an E5 and I was Ranger qualified, jump master, Pathfinder, all that stuff. And so it came time to re-up. And I asked him, I was like, hey man, I'm Ranger qualified. Can I, go, I want to go to Ranger battalion, and and I was stupid for not pressing and asking questions, but he's like, no, man, no, you have to be an 11 Bravo, because I was still 11 Hotel at the time. Really, the reg reads, if no matter whatever you are, if you're in 11 series and you have a Victor identifier, you can be whatever 11 series that you want to be. But he got me good, and so I re-upped again just to extend. I did another like 3-year for where I was. I got some college. I think I got a semester of college out of it or something like that. And but anyway, that's how I didn't get it then. And then somewhere in there, in 95, I got to do the Best Ranger competition from the 82nd. I was one of the teams from the 82nd that went down there. So, which was a big deal, at the time. And I'll gladly tell you that I was a survivor, not a competitor, at the Best Ranger competition.
It's an interesting way to phrase it, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, man. Me and my partner placed a proud 13th place. But I got to experience that, which is just incredible. And I got to jump master into the 45th anniversary, into the D-Day invasion into St. Mary Glees, France. So, I just had all these amazing experiences in the 82nd. Then I wanted to try to go the next level, which was SF. So in December of 1995, I went to SF selection, passed that, and then got chosen to be an 18 Charlie, so explosive guy. So I started the Q course that next January of 96.
What was selection like back then? I'm just curious, by the way. What was selection like? Because it's different now, right? It's 3 weeks and it's a whole different set of circumstances.
I think so, man. It was just, it was heavy on the land nav, all the individual stuff. And you still had that crazy ass team week, that was just crushing. So that was, I'm not really sure exactly what all they got going on there now, but then in 96, or 95, it was still that. I think it was a little bit less than 4 weeks. But it was, I don't even remember it that well. I just remember it really sucked a lot. And I was really glad it was over. And I was really glad that I made it. And then, so I went to the Q course, 18 Charlie, which I loved explosives. So, I got really good. And then I got chosen for 7th group, which is also one of the ones that I wanted. So again, it's mid 90s, 96, is whenever I got to my team. And again, immediately when I showed up to my team, I had 3 guys on my ODA that were El Salvador vets.
Oh, wow.
So they had been in that whole Iran-Contra and all that stuff. 3 dudes on one team that I showed up to as a 6 years in the Army E6. That's again, my teachers were, were combat veterans. And, yeah, man. So again, now I was back at the bottom of the totem pole, and just learning my way up. And again, man, I was just super fortunate. The team sergeants that I had, the team leaders that I had, and all the guys on the team. I did several deployments to Central and South America, all pre 9/11. And again, man, I just freaking loved it. I love the whole SF mission, the by, with, and through, which we call nowadays. Back then, we called it unconventional warfare and FID and all that. Mm-hmm. And but I loved it, man. And then again, so then what came up for me next was a unit selection. So I was like, man, I'll never make it out there. But I didn't want to have the regret of not trying. And I had 5 years on the team. So again, I'm getting ready to get pegged to go to SWIC and be an instructor or recruiter or something, something that I don't want to do, and what I probably should have done, but whatever. And so I was like, well, let me go give selection a try. And
this is selection for Delta you're talking about.
Yep. Yep.
And by the way, for the civilians listening, SWCC, SWC, Special Warfare Center in schools. So it's for the civilians listening, get you what he's talking about. It's where you go to teach other Green Berets or help form other Green Berets. So just want to give you the context.
Yeah, thanks, man. And so I went to selection, and never in my wildest dreams that I think I would make it. Now, I mean, I was going for it. I didn't have like a self-defeating attitude or anything, but I just always, my plan, because at that time I had 11 years in the Army. So, I was a senior E7. I was getting ready to potentially take over an ODA. And so, I didn't, so I would have been fine if I didn't make it, because I loved the being a Green Beret. I loved that mission. I would eventually, soon be a team sergeant. I was like, hey, man, let me just go knock this out. And, and just, so that way I don't have a regret. And then next thing you know, I made it. And so then, so I made selection. And then I was in the training course after that. And then in my training course, so again, back to me showing up to a place that now I'm directly underneath, combat veterans. 4 of my cadre in the training course were Gothic Serpent guys. I mean, they were Black Hawk Down. You know what I mean? They were in the Battle of Mogadishu.
Yeah.
4 of them. 4 of them are my, and part of my instructor cadre. So yet again, and that's not to mention, the ones that have done even more of that. So, that did finish my training. Went over to my unit, and that was 2002. Whenever I showed up to my team, and then that was my first combat deployment. Was to Afghanistan in the fall of 2002.
It's interesting because I always say that the Army has a funny way of putting you where you're supposed to be throughout your career. In your case, you have got the charmed military career where you were always with the right people at the right time. Do you ever kind of look back at that and wonder how much different your career would be if you hadn't had those people there?
Man, I know it. I mean, that's like a lot of people will say to me, like, oh, Tom, you're humble. You know what I mean? You soft spoken, all that. I was like, man, how can I not be
I was just
humble?
going to say, right?
I was like, man, I mean, it's not cliche. I mean, you hear it a lot, but it's like, I'm where I'm at, or I was where I was at in my military career because I literally rode on the shoulders of giants. You know what I mean? That is not a cliche. That is not an exaggeration. It was like, I mean, I busted my ass, and I did my part, and I, had an incredible work ethic, and I was getting after it and all of that stuff. I mean, I'm proud of all that I did, and on, my willingness and everything. But man, to your point, it's like, I've had friends of mine and buddies of mine, that didn't have, that had horrible leadership and horrible experiences. Some of them even got out of the military because of those experiences of the individuals that were around them. So to your point, absolutely, man, I know how charmed I was with the men I had around me.
Go back, 9/11. Where were you? I know were you trying out for Delta at the time?
No, man, it was September. So I went to selection in September of 2001 of 9/11. But it happened to be right before 9/11. Or during 9/11, I was actually in isolation with my ODA. It was a training mission, but we were going to full mission profile, and we had 3 days of isolation prior to going on a training mission. And we were in isolation on Fort Bragg whenever 9/11 occurred.
Oh, so you didn't know about it the day that it happened?
Well, I did. They realized, whenever they finally realized that that it was a terrorist attack. It was like right before the second tower fell. Right before the first tower fell, they were like, "All right, guys, hey, this training mission's over. Like something's getting ready to happen." I remember sitting in the chow hall watching TV, you know what I mean, of 9/11 happening, and then when everything went down, and then, then next thing you know, Fort Bragg is buttoning up because it was an open post at that time, everywhere it was, but especially Fort Bragg. And it was, that was 9/11. I want to say it was within 2 weeks is whenever I was in selection.
I mean, when 9/11 happens, you have to be thinking, all right, we're going to war. And
oh, yeah.
Not like Desert Storm war. Like, this is a different level of war. Like, you're finally going to get a taste of, and again, as you mentioned, you had done deployments to South America and Central America. But did you know that this was going to be completely different?
Absolutely. Yeah, man. I mean, I just kind of, the writing was on it was, and within, and I had buddies of mine, that I went to the Q course and all that with, that were in third group and everything. I mean, there was guys, palletizing, and getting ready to deploy, within 10 days after, 9/11 happened. And so, I mean, I was dropping buddies off, getting gear, all of that. And one part of me, was like, man, maybe I should just stay, with my ODA. The only reason why I did it is because I was in seventh group and I knew they were going to be the last on the list, to go to war. It's like, so my best opportunities of getting to war was going to be to go to selection,
right.
And I just didn't want to derail that piece of it. I just kind of wanted to continue with the course. And if I didn't make it, I wouldn't have lost anything. I'd still been with my ODA.
Right.
And so, yeah, man, that was all going on that same month, when we were at selection. Occasionally you get to see a television and by then they were already, dropping some bombs and guys were launching. So, yeah.
So you get to Afghanistan when in 2002?
It was in the fall. I want to say it was either September or October. I think October.
Okay. What is your mission when you get there? What are you told?
Well, what we were doing it during that time, we were reacting to time-sensitive targets.
Okay. And bin Laden is still an active target in the fall of 2002.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what everybody was still, hunting down the trail. And, and the guy that, one of the guys that I worked for was the guy that wrote Kill Bin Laden.
Dalton Fury.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's a good friend of mine.
He has since passed on of cancer.
He sure has.
But that book, if you guys haven't read it, Kill Bin Laden by Dalton Fury, and Dalton Fury is a pen name for obvious reasons, but it is an excellent read on what went on in the mountains of Tora Bora in December of 2001, and literally how close we were to getting him. As a matter of fact, we had him, right? And you can verify that. We had him, but there were, Dalton cites three things that prevented us from getting him. One, the use of Afghan proxies to put a face on this thing, because it was the American government's genius idea that, we wanted the Afghans to look like they captured him, right? Because us getting him himself was not the right thing to do. Asinine thought. But anyway, so we had to use these Afghan proxies, and lo and behold, you have two warlords fighting over who's going to be the Afghan clan that gets to claim this whole thing. The second reason was lack of sufficient ground forces to backfill, and particularly talking about Rangers and Special Ops guys on the ground to supplement what you guys had there. And then third, they talk about the inability to secure the Pakistan border. And that's really what we believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's how we snuck out through the mountains of Afghanistan out into Pakistan and was able to escape Tora Bora alive.
As far as we know, you know what I mean? That's just everybody's, I think, best guess, because, we effectively evaded, but during that time, that was, again, it was just right there in the fall of 2002. And I stayed there from October to, I think it was into January, and then that's whenever, that's going into 2003, and that's whenever, they're starting to position and everything for Iraq.
Let me ask you, when you're somebody on the ground chasing after this guy that the whole world is trying to hunt down, what do you feel like your percentages of getting him are? Like, I can't comprehend that. Like, I don't have the intel and the information to know. Did you feel like you were close?
I was too new.
to really understand?
Yeah. You know what I mean? I was, I was too new to really, I mean, I understand the intel packets and, and all that kind of stuff and probability and all of that, and you were always hoping, you know what I mean, and being optimistic about it. But at the end of the day, you know what I mean? But that was my whole military career, whether it was, or combat career, whether it was looking for bin Laden, or whether it was trying to find Saddam Hussein, or whether that was getting Zarqawi, or whether it was going after AAM. You know what I mean? There's an endless string of people for us to go after,
Right, yeah.
But at that time, it was, I was just, again, I was a new guy on a team. So, man, I'm just trying to keep up and not screw this good deal I got going on, by being a knucklehead, and just focusing on my job and doing what my team leader wants me to do, on that 2IC.
Put it in retrospect, though, knowing the information you know now and how seasoned you became, when you think back on chasing bin Laden in Afghanistan, did you feel like, you were as close as you were, or you still can't really put a grasp on it?
Well, I wasn't with him on that first rotation.
Right.
You know what I mean, on that piece. But whenever I rolled into the fall, it seemed like we were far away. The folks that we were going after were, they were a couple removed.
Right.
It wasn't like, you know what I mean, like, hey, this guy knows where he's at kind of deal. You know what I mean? It was, we at that point in time, we were a little bit behind the power curve. But, back then in 2002, we didn't have the signal intelligence that we had in 2005. Mm-hmm. So when it came to targeting and HUMINT, that was all so new, and everybody, as much as some experts like to think that they were experts, we didn't really understand the whole clans and the tribes and, and what all that really, really meant, on the ground. Intellectually, we had studied it and we knew about it, but it's like, okay, but this is how this works. Like, no kidding. There's
a huge gap there. Yeah. It's like the ridiculous classes they give you, or at least the regular Army guys get before you go into Iraq, like, on the culture and everything else. And then you work side by side with these guys. You're like, what the hell were they thinking? Like, they literally have no idea how large the gap between what they're telling us is and reality. One other thing I think that they severely underestimated, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. You mentioned how you struggled at mountain phase during Ranger School. Well, this is a whole different level of mountain phase in Afghanistan. I mean, what was that like for you, and how much of a challenge was the terrain? Because we mention it all the time to people in Afghanistan. I don't think pictures ever do it justice.
No,
when you're standing at the bottom of a mountain in Afghanistan, having to climb up that thing or go down it, and what it's like.
Oh man, it is. It is horrendous. But the thing is that the benefit that I had at that time is that I was in insane shape. I mean, nothing prepares you, like you said, for those just smoke fests going up those mountains. I mean, it's just, you can't put words to it, I mean, I can't anyway. But the only good thing that I had going for me is that, at that point in time, I was at some of the peak shape, of my life. So that helped me out some.
All right. So after that deployment ends, you end up going to Iraq, part of the invasion?
No, we came in two or 3 months after our rotation came in. In the summertime, June or July is whenever my first trip to Iraq.
Now, this first trip is the first mission, basically go find Saddam Hussein.
I mean, that was our target set. Was the top guys, on targets, and so. So, I mean, they were hunting the deck, right? The deck of cards.
Right, deck of cards, sure.
What I mean? So, and the amazing difference, between 2003, the difference between 2003 and 2004 is like the difference between, an Apple and a Volkswagen, because during the 2003, I mean, the guys on the invasion got into, some pretty good fights, and a lot of fights. And then on our rotation, we got into some, but that's when it started kind of getting. But there was no foreign fighter thing going on. It was just the old regime, and and all that was dispersing, and and we had a lot of freedom of movement. There was no IEDs. I mean, some of the studying guys would have some mines and stuff, but it was nothing like what would happen, in the spring of '04. So, that rotation was it was good. But then whenever it came to, my, I think it was the next one or the one after that was, in the spring of '04 when they hung up the Blackwater guys, that kicked the whole thing off was Zarqawi, and the first Battle of Fallujah and all of that. I was in Ramadi during that time, and then we ended up going into the first Battle of Fallujah, and but that's when everything changed. We had these foreign fighters that were much like the foreign fighters in Afghanistan. They were combat experienced, and they were hardened, trained fighters. So it was some fighting going on, and that's when everything, that's when the casualty count really started going up. But then bloody '05, '06, was whenever just everything kicked off, and that's when the surge happened.
I heard surge happens in '07 because the height of the violence was '05. And that's when I was there, and it was bad. I mean, it was every day there was a report coming out. The IED surge really started in late 2004 into 2005, and it changed the whole basically battle space. It changed the picture of the war.
Absolutely, man. And then in 2006, I was, with my charmed military career, I also got some, you can't have the good without the bad, right? And I say it's bad, but I was super fortunate and grateful to be a part of it because of my medical training, that I got, during all of our training out at the unit, lots and lots of medical, because a lot of it was self-aid, buddy aid, medic, and so we had extensive medical training, but I was a part of 3 mass casualty events, during my deployments, and the last one was in September of 2006. It was in Yusufia, Iraq, the Triangle of Death, they called it at the time. They had shot a bunch of helicopters down, and it wasn't long after they rolled up and massacred, and tortured the 101st guys, that got rolled up down there in Mahmoudiya and Yusufia at the old Russian power plant.
Yes,
and so we were down there, and we were augmenting, helping out the 82nd, which was good, and so what ended up happening, short version is that it was a battalion mission going on. So, companies out, mortars were set up, everything was good, sniper positions, the whole full war meal deal. And we had a 82 millimeter mortar round landed about 20 meters from where I was standing. So we had about 2 guys, killed instantly, and then had about 13 of them that were severely wounded. And unbeknownst to me at that time is whenever I got my traumatic brain injury. I was knocked out, broke my wrist, my thumb. But when I came to, it was all about, obviously helping the wounded. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of medics around there. They were having to come over from the battalion, where the battalion was set up. And so just me and my sniper partner, and the guys on the ground there, just went and addressing this event. And so 2 things happened for me that were significant and changing in how I went forward from 2006 to 2009. And 2 things happened. One thing happened was mechanically, I use different words, but mechanically something broke in my head, meaning I got I had a traumatic brain injury and I didn't know about it. And then the second thing that happened was that I kind of got broke emotionally. I got broke emotionally because in my mind, even though this is an unrealistic expectation, in my mind, working where I worked, a lot of folks looked at us like, oh, that's Big Brother, man. If those guys are around, we're good. And a lot of times when I'd be around, they'd just get blasted. And so with this one, it was like, you know, I mean, at this time, you know, I'm 36 years old, you know, 18 years old. I mean, I'm not quite old enough to be some of these 17, 18-year-olds dads, but pretty close
Right.
enough, you know, man. And it broke, you know, it broke my heart into a million pieces. And because in my mind is like, okay, my job is to protect these guys, you know, and then this was my third mass casualty, and it's like, okay, man, what does a protector do when he fails to protect that which matters most? You know, and it broke me. So I was left with two choices. I could quit, you know, I just quit, I guess, and go on, you know what I mean, or I refocus. And I refocused on, it's like, okay, well, if I can't protect them like this, then, you know, as many as the bad guys as we can get, you know, if there's no bad guys, then they can't hurt my guys. So that was my next mission. And it's what significantly happened to me at that time on the inside it became very personal. Instead of being, I mean, I was always professional. There's nothing that I did that I regret or any of that kind of crap. But it became very personal for me at the time, which was very detrimental to me, not to the mission, not to anyone around me, but like to just my person, kind of, you know what I mean? Because I was consumed with one thing and one thing only, and that was getting the bad guys. And so I did, you know, I think 4 more deployments after that,
Right.
up until 2009. So with the untreated TBI, you know, I was getting more concussions and I was having a lot more problems. And then I'd had several injuries, broken back surgery, you know, I mean, just the normal 40 months of combat, you know, that'll break stuff in you. But at the end of my career, I had 19 years in the Army. And so I had to make a decision. It's like, okay, as a team leader, you know, I mean, I was living the dream for, you know, almost 10 years there. And it's like, but I was having some severe back issues. Like I couldn't wear kit without taking narcotics. And I wasn't going to obviously take narcotics, you know, and wear kit. So it had, the pain and everything had gotten that bad. And so at 19 years, I had to make a decision of, okay, take the bonus money and kind of stay in, but not be in kit. I was going to have to take a different kind of job, you know, or get out. And so some other things were going on during that time. So one thing that is super important to mention is in 1992, I got sober. I struggled with alcoholism at a very young age. And that partly when I was alluding to me not doing good in college and all that, you know, was a huge part of that. And then I was getting in a lot of trouble. And, you know, and then me and my wife ended up getting separated, and which she was really the only thing that I cared about more than the military. And so I got sober in 1992. And that's a huge part of my story, especially how it goes today. So I got sober, and, you know, I mean, alcohol is a big part of our culture and everything. So I'm not like the alcohol police or anything.
Right.
And I'm not against alcohol. What I'm against is substances, you know what I mean, hijacking our guys' lives, you know, and destroying families and causing suicide rates. Like I got a problem with that, and you should too, you know. So, but in 92, I got sober, and that set the tone for me in how I live my life, you know, in the military, you know. So the 18 years of my military career, I was sober. And when I say sober, it means like, hey, I'm going to meetings. I'm part of a 12-step group, you know, helping other guys out, you know, the full gamut, full tilt. I loved it. Still love it. And so that was all in my career. The reason why that's important at the end was because I was really bad off when I made the decision to get like, okay, I'm going to get out of the Army. I had untreated TBI. The only thing that saved me was a buddy of mine named Ryan. We were in special forces together, and he went to some other special mission units, and he had gotten shot in the head in 2005.
Damn.
And when I say shot in the head, I mean it hit his head, It didn't penetrate the brain barrier, but it was a headshot. And so again, that was 2005, where we weren't really switched on to TBI and all that stuff. So he got really quality of care. And so this was now 2010, almost 5 years later. And he would tell me, he was my best friend. So I would be completely honest with him what I was thinking about, what was going on with me. And he was telling me, he was on me, man, like only another warrior can be. It's like, hey, man, you are freaking screwed up, and you have got stuff going on in your head. And I was like, well, man, everybody I know has been blown up. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not anything special. And, but finally, it was like, okay, I'm going to go get some help. And so what triggered me to getting some help, right? So I had, number one, it wasn't because Tom's great idea, number one, because that would never happen. Because one thing I want to talk a little bit about is, how because I used to say it all the time, is we always say, like, hey, man, if you need anything, just let me know, and I'll help you out. Well, let's look at that statement for a second and just look at me. With all the things that I had been through and all the selections that I'd been through, when you go through a selection, it produces a certain profile and a certain end results, right? Well, two main factors that are in that end results is, number one, I'll never quit. And then number two, I'm never going to ask for help. That's why you selected me. Right. And now you tell me if I have problems to let you know. Like, that doesn't even follow a train of logic. But I learned that narrative as I was going through my own stuff, because what triggered me to actually do what my buddy said to do was my thought process. So I wouldn't know where I was at times. I lost the ability to visualize things. I was having huge mood swings, a lot of emotions going on. And then, but I had a lot of tools in my tool belt, right? And so what I needed to do was the noise in my head. I needed that to be quiet. So I have tools in the toolbox. So for me, it was prayer. Tried prayer, didn't work. Tried, hey, work with another alcoholic. I did that, didn't work. Hey, do this step work. I did that, didn't work. I went through my whole toolbox and been like, okay, this isn't stopping what's going on in I need this noise to stop in my head. And then I thought, well, I know what bullets do to brains. And so I know that'll turn it off. So I start going through MDMP, military decision-making process, on why this is a valid course of action of me putting a bullet in my brain. But let me pause there for a second. Again, I had untreated TBI, which affected the executive functioning of my brain, meaning my decision making. And so I'm running this course of action of why using this pistol is a valid course of action. In a military decision making process, I was working through that process towards execution, and then I paused. And you can call it the grace of God, you can call it a moment of clarity, whatever you want to call it. But I realized what I was thinking. That I was thinking that this was a valid course of action. And as soon as I realized that, of course, I said to myself, I'm in a lot of trouble, and that was the trigger for me to say to my buddy Ryan, like, okay, man, what were those tests again? So I went and got tested, 8 hours of testing for TBI. It's, the definitive, non-subjective, if you're trying to cheat on it and all that, it comes out. So basically I had 50%, I was operating on 50% processing speed and 50% of verbal memory. So I had significant, mild traumatic brain injury. Wow. I didn't think there was anything mild about it, but, So anyway, to fast forward a little bit, I went to the, I was like, hey, because I was starting to let my family down a little bit, and that bothered me greatly, because I'm very proud husband, I'm proud father. At the time I had two boys that were 8 and 11. My wife and I had been together since 1990. And
you're one of the few special operators, by the way, who's had a marriage last that long. You know that, right?
And you know that mainly has to do with my wife.
Damn saint, isn't she?
She is. So that's what I always say is like, who's the dumb one, you know? And but you know, but I, you know, I mean, I wasn't doing anything crazy. I wasn't like breaking things at the house. I was doing is just I was vacant. It's like I was physically here, but I was not here, you know. And I had all kinds of untreated, unprocessed emotion, you know, PTS they call it. You know, I mean, I like the original version back in the Civil War. They called it soldier's heart. You know, and it's just what happens when warriors experience combat, you know what I mean, for an extended period of time. But so I went to cognitive therapy, I went to physical therapy, I went to psychological therapy, I went to vestibular therapy, and I even got on meds for about 8 months. I was on Zoloft for me at that time, just a light dose, but you know, I had a little bit of a chemical imbalance going on at that time. But if you saw me on the street, you wouldn't know it. You know, I mean, I was a functioning guy. I mean, I was okay, but I wasn't okay. And the thing about me going to all those different therapies is that they all work. But the key thing, the reason why all those things worked is that I wasn't self-medicating. You know what I mean? I wasn't, when I say self-medicating, I wasn't abusing prescription stuff. I wasn't taking anything I wasn't supposed to be doing. And for me, I wasn't drinking anything. You know what I mean? I was living a good lifestyle. You know what I mean? I had untreated traumatic brain injury, and I had unprocessed trauma. And so what I needed was treatment for my traumatic brain injury, you know what I mean, and processing for my untreated trauma. And so I did that, and lo and behold, I got better. I mean, it wasn't no over the night kind of thing. I mean, it was a struggle, but I mean, I was, you know what I mean, I started tackling that stuff the same way I did my military career. It's like, hey, what school can I go to? I'll try, you know what I mean, hyperbaric chamber. I'll try EMDR. I'll try go, you know what I mean? It was like, hey, I just took the same mindset that served me so well in my military career and applied it to my healing, and to being a good dad and a good husband and earning a living and making a difference and tending to the health and welfare of the troops. You know what I mean? So I had my mission, which was to take care of my family, which was included me having a job, you know, and then health and welfare of the troops. For me, now that I was a veteran and out of the military, you know, it was, you know, in 2010 and 2011, you didn't hear about 22 veteran suicides a day. No one, that wasn't anything that was on the news. That wasn't anything that anybody talked about. It was in random articles and stuff like that. And I was floored whenever I was like, this can't be right. You know, I'm a fact finder, right? So, so an intel guy, you know what I mean? Hey, what's the facts? You know, and then lo and behold, it's like, holy shit, this is real. This is true. And oh, by the way, it's been going on for a few years now already. So I got really involved in, obviously with my own experience of near, you know, contemplating taking my own life because it seemed like a good idea. And again, it's super important for me to say that because it wasn't that I was going around thinking like people would be better off without me, or, you know, I thought it was a good idea because my brain was not working right, you know. And then, so then I see all these guys that are suffering, and a lot of them friends that I know, you know. And the only difference between me and them was I didn't have a self-medication issue, and you know, I mean, I had a good lifestyle and I was doing all that, so I got really involved in you know, in the veteran suicide piece. And me and a buddy of mine who was in third group named Magnus Johnson, we came up with Elder Heart, which was combined art pieces, you know, to honor those that had lost what we call the war at home, you know, to taking their own lives. And, you know, and then we switched that into Mission 22, you know, and so we were just doing a lot of really good work and, you know, paying the bills and just trying to go along. But my real passion has always been about sobriety, about chemical dependencies, and helping guys get free of all of that. And so in 2013, I met a man named Josh Laden, I was putting on what I call a fun and gun event. You know what I mean? Where we bring in CEOs and stuff, and we put them through some hardcore training, and we give them some shooting, and it's really good stuff, and they love it. And I met Josh, and Josh at the time had been running chemical dependency places, rehabs, high quality, high level of care for over 15 years, at that time, successfully. So short version is he's like, hey man, my next thing we want to do is a veteran healing center. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of into that, and so me and his wife, Lisa, who's the business partner combo also, we started coming up with what we call Warrior's Heart. So we started getting that together in 2013, and then it started coming to fruition in 2015. And we got our property in 2015 in Bandera, Texas, and in April of 2016, we're a licensed facility. And so from April 2016 to now, we've had right at 1,300 warriors come through Warrior's Heart for chemical dependencies, post-traumatic stress, mild traumatic brain injury, moral grief and injury, and all the other co-occurring conditions that happen. Because the big thing for me was the majority of the suicides, the veteran suicides that I was exposed to and that I knew about, there was always a chemical involved. Either they were abusing illicit drugs, prescription drugs, or they were drunk as crazy. And so it's because with our type of folk, when someone takes their own life, what usually is said is, oh my gosh, I didn't think he was that bad off, or man, I knew it was bad, but I didn't think, there was no signs or symptoms. It's not a cry for help. When our type decides that they're leaving this earth, they do it. So there's no really preempted, like you can't stop that. So for me, it was like this, and everyone like me, I'm definitely not the only one. There's an army of us doing it. Is like, man, how do we get ahead of this? And for me, it was like, okay, well, if the majority of them are struggling with some form of self-medication when they do the act, what if we get ahead of it and hit it with the struggling with self-medication? Because maybe if we remove the self-medication and process some of that trauma, they won't get to that spot. Mm-hmm. Because if they get to the spot, they're just going to do it. So that's why it was, again, just super, had always been a big passion of mine. And then with me, Josh, and Lisa, and then all the team at Warrior's Heart, that is what we do. I mean, that is our thing. And we're the only one in the nation. So there is no other facility in the United States of America, probably in the world, but for sure in the United States of America, that handles only the warrior population. What I mean when I say warrior population, I mean military members, active duty and veterans, law enforcement, and all first responders. So basically those that face life and death on a daily basis as a profession, is who comes to Warrior's Heart. That's the only ones, and we're the only one in nation that just serve that population.
Right. Let me ask you, because I mentioned earlier your brother was on the podcast. He dealt with a lot of his own issues as well that were similar to yours. Where was he in all this? I mean, did you guys ever connect on any of this? Were you afraid to talk to each other?
No, man. We Scott and I were hugely involved before I met up with Magnus and we started Elder Heart. Scott and I is who initially kicked this stuff off. When I say this stuff, I'm talking about my little world, not like everywhere. But Scott and I did, I think it was 2011. It might have been 12. We did the first thing we ever did was an NRA video. It was an NRA Life of Duty Patriot profile, and it's called Forward March. And it's Scott and I, and Scott and I were the ones that we started all of this thing off. Scott got really involved in so I went the tactical way. I stayed on the ranges and in the shoot houses because that's where I needed to be, and Scott needed to. You've talked with him, man. I mean, he is gifted Andy's works his ass off, and at personal development and at coaching others. So Scott really went into that vein, and I went into the other vein. I mean, we started this whole piece together as far as the war at home. We were on several different podcasts, and yeah, man. And even though a lot of the times that we aren't together overtly, we're always together behind the scenes trying to figure stuff out and work on things and promoting for one another. And no, man, he was Scott was there from the beginning and still now.
All right, a lot to unpack. And the challenges of TBI and PTSD and everything else is something that we've gone over, nearly in every podcast we do. But the thing is, it's an individual problem for everybody, right? Like it's almost like a fingerprint. Nobody handles this thing the exact same way. Sure, there are tendencies, and there are some commonalities between it, but ultimately, the solution that works for you doesn't always work for everybody else. And
Correct.
So, in your work with all these veterans going forward, is there something you realize or have stumbled on that you see is a commonality that isn't readily available, or isn't cognizant to everybody?
Yeah, man, but it's the same. So I agree definitely with what you said. Everybody gets it a little bit different, but certain principles hold true for all, just like in the military. There's certain things that, hey, this unit does it this way, this one does it a little bit different this way, but fundamentally, there's a standard. And principally, and things are principally driven. So those principles, while we can say that, hey, everybody does the flavor and heal a little bit differently, that's true. However, fundamentally, there's certain things that all of them that are successful do. When I say all, I'm just saying 80% rule, because we know nothing's 100%. So, and all that stuff that keeps guys, that gets guys healed, trained up and healed up is the same things that we did in the military. When did you ever do anything by yourself in the military?
You went to the bathroom by yourself. That was about it.
That maybe, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Maybe, if you were lucky. Right. But it was always the buddy rule. It was always with the team. It was always the squad. It was, you never, like, when I say never, 80% rule, you're always with it. So then guys get out of the military, or they get out of law enforcement, or they get out of this profession, and they try to handle everything on their own. Like, that doesn't follow a warrior train of logic, because you always have your battle buddy. So they get on these islands and they get by themselves, and they don't have a team, and they don't have a mission, and they don't have a purpose. And therefore it don't work, because we're not wired that way. We're not wired that way. We need a mission. We need a purpose. We need a team. That's just how we're wired. And we need to be serving others. That's what we've done our whole adult lives. And it's what we continue. It's when we stop that process of being a warrior, because I didn't know. That was a big lesson learned for me was, I thought me being a warrior was defined by my prowessness on the battlefield, and although at that time that was accurate, hey, I proved I'm not a coward. I proved I have some courage, and I can look out for the next man, but I didn't die. So then I got out of the military, and it's like, well, what do old broke warriors do? Like, last thing I want to be is that guy talking about Ranger School, or, you know what I'm saying? The guy talking about basic training stories. It's like, no, man, I want to be engaged and involved in what's going on in life now. So how do I do that? Where do I fit in? What is my next mission? Who do I want to go down that road with? Because alone, I'm not, and you nailed it, Mark. Some guys don't have problems with PTS. They naturally process it all. Some guys don't struggle at all. So not everybody needs like a lot of help. There's a lot of people that are just hugely successful when they get out of the militaries, and that's wonderful. And those guys do not need my help. The guys that need my help are the ones that are like me, that struggle greatly with their experiences, whether it was at war, whether it was having TBI, whatever it was, but for me, it was like, hey, it's part of the warrior's path. Old warriors who don't die, you know what I mean, are then become teachers. You know what I mean? Like that's a continuation of the warrior's path. What's not a continuation of the warrior's path is me to just continuously reminisce about the old days and sit at home and not do anything and isolate and not be a part of this wonderful life in this wonderful country that we all fought so hard for. It's not anybody else's fault but my own, and again, I go back to, it's not up to guys to reach out to me to tell me that they need help. It's up to me to reach out to them. You know what I mean? Because we all know folks that are struggling.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so for me, I had to change the narrative where it was like, because the first thing that comes to mind, man, if you need anything, let me know. And that's not right. What needs to happen, if I know somebody's struggling, then I reach out to them. Right? Because they're not going to ask for help because they're a good teammate. They don't want to drag me down or whatever else is going on in their head. It's up to me to aggravate the hell out of them. You know what I mean? Where are you? What are you doing? It's like, oh, and you know how the conversations usually go is like, hey man, how's it going? The guy's like, oh man, everything's going good. It's like, okay, well, tell me what's good going on.
What do you miss the most about team life and being in the SOF community?
Man, I don't miss it at all because I got it now. But what I do, let me tell you this, or let me rephrase that. So number one, I don't miss it all because I have a team and I have a mission and I'm with a lot of the same guys that I've always rolled with, and I'm meeting new teammates. So that's super awesome and badass. And then, but man, I'm here to tell you, I will always miss blowing stuff up and trying to get bad guys. You know what I'm saying? Like that will never.
Well, that's a different kind of adrenaline junkie, right?
Yeah, man. And for me, it was just I just loved it. I mean, because for a while after the adrenaline was gone, by 2005, I think my adrenal glands turned off. So I mean, for me, it was I will always love blowing stuff up, being on helicopters, getting bad guys, man. There will not ever be a time until I'm now here no more, that I won't want to do that. However, I'm broke and I'm old and I'm not in the military anymore. So it's like, okay, what's next? And what's next is to do what was so graciously done for me. And it's now time for me to be that old, crusty, salty dude and give the new guys, what was given to me. That is the full circle of the warrior continuum. And what happens with some of our greatest warriors, our most experienced ones that don't get healing, that need it, not talking about the ones that don't do it, then that next generation is missing out on them because they're not available, and that's a tragedy right there. And so no, man, I'll always miss doing the job that I used to do, but it was over. Unless it's something kicks up here on U.S. soil, I won't be doing that again.
Right.
And I had to that was a big part. I had to embrace that truth. If I want to still do war, like I can get on a plane and fly right in, get on a contract and I can go do it. A lot of guys still do that. And that's wonderful if that's what they want to do. If that brings them happiness and contentment in their life, man, like you said, everybody is different, but for me, whenever I took the uniform off, that's when it ended for me, and actually I didn't want it to end. I had planned on staying in to, at least 25 and, doing it. But I mean, I had injuries and all that other stuff going on.
Right.
And, and then I just had to assume the next mission. And the next mission for me was to give back.
Right.
And not just to veterans and not just to law enforcement, but to my community.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To be a part of what's going on, all around me. Of course, you know what I mean? I take care of veterans and law enforcement. Those are our people, but the thing is I also have to have to do my part for the community, because it's a big thing that, veterans say that, well, civilians just don't understand, like they don't get it. And it's like, yeah, man, why don't they get it? Well, they don't get it because we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't get, like, whose responsibility is for them to get it? It's ours. You know what I mean? And obviously, I'm talking about get it, like truly understand it, but to have those conversations with them. I mean, if some dude asks you, like, how many people did you kill? You know what I mean? It's like, shut up, you know what I mean? And move on. Obviously, he's an idiot. You know what I mean? But it's like, if someone's asking questions, like, have those engaging conversations. How else are they supposed to know what we do?
Well,
How else are they supposed to know our families?
I think there's a lot more in common with any traumatic event, like the traumatic events of combat. I mean, one of the forms of PTSD is flashbacks. I mean, if somebody who was mugged or, jumped on the street, they will have flashbacks about that event. The same way we have flashbacks about events we have went through. There's a commonality. There's a ground that you both can discuss there. And like you said, we don't discuss it because we assume no one can understand what combat is like. Well, I until I get mugged, I don't understand what getting mugged is like. But that doesn't mean I can't have somebody explain it to me, and and I can't relate to it in a certain way. Of course we can. And
Mark, it's just like you said, man. There's so much. Like, are there differences? Absolutely, there's differences, man. But there's so much common ground. Like, we can all talk about what it's like to be afraid. We can all talk about what it's like to feel grief and loss. We can all talk about anger. We can all talk about being overwhelmed or hopeless, you know what I mean, or desperate. Like, there's so much that we can relate with one another if we choose to, and if we don't, we don't, you know what I mean? Hey, it's America, right? You can do whatever you want to do, man, with whoever you want to do it with. So, but that's where, to me, it's, as, old warriors that didn't die, it's like, hey, man, we have to change the narrative. You know what I mean? We have 100%. To know that there's strength in healing. We have to know that, like, hey, shit, dude, I would get in a gunfight in a second versus having to go talk to a psychologist. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like that, gunfight, near-death experience, all that. It's like, yeah, I love it, built for it. But like, you told me that I need to talk about my emotions or what's bothering me and that kind of stuff. Like, that takes real courage, and a different kind of courage, which I found myself lacking in. But it was just, and everything that I tell you about my story is what's incorporated at Warrior's Heart. Whenever it came to all the different segments, because, with folks that are struggling with self-medication, I don't care how much PTSD treatment you go to. I don't care how much TBI treatment you go to. I don't care if you go talk to the Dalai Lama. Like, you got to treat what's killing you first, right? I mean, it's just like CQB. It's just like, hey, if we got to take down this whole hotel, 20 floors, and we got, 20 rooms on each floor, how the hell do we do that? Well, we do it one room at a time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You got to address what's going to kill us first. Because if you're worried about something else further down the line, then it's not going to work out, And that's what we got right. All of the experiences that I personally have had, everything that there's no theory crap that we do out there. Everything that we do out at Warrior's Heart is battle proven. And when I say battle proven in the war here at home, because, you'll have a lot of people say that, hey, man, when you're talking about chemical dependencies, when you're talking about TBI and you're talking about PTS, he's like, hey, man, those are super complex issues. And while they may be super complex issues to some people, that's called Tuesday afternoon at Warrior's Heart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I get it. It may seem difficult to some, but it's just because, again, back to, we are the population that we serve, right? I know how much psychology the guys and gals can handle. I know how much medical. I know how much psych. I know how much, because it's not like we heal and get better and become hippies. We're still warriors. It doesn't change who we are, and then it's up to us, to go out there and bring the next guy in. And that's why we have that peer network that we have out there, because that's the true magic. Yeah, we do our one-on-ones. Yeah, we do the processing of trauma. Yes, we train them up on the chemical dependencies aspect of it. But at the end of the day, the magic is in the team.
I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned earlier how you had learned that, soldiers' health and welfare was training them for combat and making sure they're able to survive.
That's right.
You didn't grasp that as a younger soldier. Obviously, you do when you go through combat. And you talk about loss and losing guys that, went on missions with you and everything else. How much of what you struggled with was due to the loss? And did you feel like those guys had given you the right tools in your toolkit to deal with that?
No, they did not give me the right tools. They gave me the tools that I needed at the time, and that was for combat. Because we all know how hard it is to take a human being, and train them in a manner which will enable them to take another human being's life. Like that's a lot of training that goes into that. That's a lot of. I mean, it takes all efforts, in order for that to happen, because that is the only reason of the U.S. military's existence, to kill our enemies, to defeat our enemies. And so what those men that you talked about, they taught me everything that I needed while I was in the military at that time. And the military has come light years even since I've gotten out, where they address the emotional component, where they address the mind, body, spirit. It's like, hey, yeah, we have to prep and be ready to survive and thrive in combat, but also we have to survive and thrive back at home, and that's a different skill set, and I didn't learn all of those things while I was in the military. Like I said, they are doing a much better job at it now, but we still got a long ways to go. But I don't fault those men for not teaching me those things, because you know what? They didn't know them either. And at the time, again, it goes back to priorities. What do we, being in combat, being like, hey, what are the priorities? Like, it's combat. We'll worry about the aftermath later. Well, now is later. I mean, yeah, there's still war going on. Our troops are still in combat. We still are losing guys. But now we have the ability, to fill the gap which some of our elders didn't have before. Now we know better, so we can do better. And but to me, that's where a big part of the community comes into play. And with the veterans and with the old dudes, like me.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, hey, man, how do we? You got to get the word out and let guys know that, hey, man, for you to seek training. Because let's call it what it is. It's training. I'm either trained or untrained, right? So for me to seek help and seek training, in getting an emotional skill set in my toolkit is the same as me going to a pistol or a carbine class because I suck at shooting.
Yeah.
It's like I suck at shooting because I've never been trained. Once I got trained, I shot better, right? So if you ask me, Tom, when's the last time you did your emotional training? I'm like, well, never. And it's like, well, okay, well then doesn't it explain why you suck emotionally? Following again the training concepts, crawl, walk, run. I mean, all the stuff that we learned in the military, all they have to do is apply it to this different skill set. And it is that simple. But again, because, a lot of docs and a lot of folks will try to get into a bunch of big words and foo-foo stuff and, complexities and philosophies and this and that. And it's like, no, man, tell me 3 emotional tools that you have. How do you ground yourself whenever you're stressed out? How do you control your breathing whenever you're starting to have a panic attack? You know what I'm saying? Whatever they are, just make sure you got 3 tools in your toolkit whenever it comes to mental and emotional health. I'm not saying become, like Tony Robbins or something, not that there's anything wrong with Tony Robbins, but you don't have to be him. You can still be a warrior. Because isn't that really what a warrior is? You know what I mean? Who is a good husband, who is a good dad, and who is a badass warrior. I mean, to me, that's the full package.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I don't know how else to say it other than what we said before, that it's been a kind of a charmed military life for you.
Yep.
But, that sort of glosses over what you had to deal with on the tail end, right? Because none of that was charmed. While you got to, you led a charmed life, through combat and through your military experience, it wasn't as such on the back end. And that sort of, I think, strikes a perfect balance between, the highs and lows of everybody's military career to a certain extent, especially one that is surrounded by combat and is surrounded by multiple deployments and everything else. I mean, it's a constant roller coaster ride. And the fact that you come out of this thing in relatively good mental health and relatively good physical health, I think is a testament to all the people, as you said, that have gotten you to this point in your career. But it was almost like it was a smooth transition, right? These people carried you through and then left you in a position that you were smart enough to figure out the rest of it on your own. And thankfully you did, and thankfully you're in a place now where there's an answer and a path for you.
Yeah, man. And it goes back to what we were saying about the principles, because it comes back to, is it working or is it not working in my life? Because if something's working in my life, then absolutely, man. Hey, rock on, enjoy,
Yeah.
But if something's not working, whatever that something is, it's like, okay, well, what would I do when I was in the military when something didn't work? Well, I went and got trained. I went and asked somebody like, hey, man, I'm struggling in this kind of area. Can you help me out? You appear not to be struggling. Like, can you help me out? Like, oh, yeah, sure, bro. Like, hey, check this out. Maybe this will work. Maybe it's not. So that's the thing is back to what you said of all what they instilled into me was always to seek excellence. Always. Never, it's always about training. You're never good enough. And I mean that in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I can always be better. So I can ask myself, man, like, what areas in my life am I struggling? And it's like, okay, if I'm struggling in those areas, how can I get better? Who can I get to assist me? Again, back to that simple, practical, logical processes, not any of these big upheavals and, any of that stuff. Just like, hey, man, how do I get a little bit better? And then the next day, how do I get a little bit better? And just again, I mean, everyone knows it's a human thing. I have to have purpose in life. I have to have a reason why I get up in the morning and start my day, because if I don't have that, which I've suffered for at times, is that, it's just not, it may not be horrible, but it's not everything that I fought for. You know what I mean? That it's my responsibility to seek out the help that I need. And it's my responsibility to seek out the ones that do not have the capability of seeking help for their own self.
Well, Tom, it's been an amazing journey, one I've enjoyed hearing everything about, and we didn't even scratch the surface of the combat portion of it, honestly, because, in 12 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, there's probably a lot there, but I think the message you're leaving after the fact is probably more important than the one that is, told by war stories or tales of combat and survival. But that said, man, I mean, wow, just totally impressed and amazed by what you've been able to accomplish, and the journey that you're on now is one that's going to impact lives and make everybody better going forward. So certainly thank you for that.
Absolutely, Mark. And thank you for having me, man, and thank you for listening to me ramble.
No, brother, listen, man. I mean, I say it, and I said it last week on the introduction to the podcast, that somebody in all the rambling, and it's not rambling, but what you have deemed as rambling, somebody's going to be able to relate to that. Somebody's going to hear something that's going to change their life for the better, and that is something I can't underscore enough. As I said, not everybody deals with it the same way, but somebody can find commonality in the way you dealt with it, and I think that in and of itself is the message we can leave everybody with. So, again, thank you so much for your time, your honesty, your candor, and certainly thank you for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.